Hi, and welcome back to the Drama Free Healthy Living podcast. I'm your host, Jess, and I'm so excited that you're joining me for this episode. I'm going to do a little solo episode today about something I've been getting a lot of questions about in my practice, which is why muscle matters, especially for women over 35, or as we get into that some of those hormonal shifts that happen as we get into perimenopause and menopause. A lot of my clients have been telling me that they are hearing about muscle and they're hearing that it's important. They're hearing that they should eat protein, but they're a little confused as to what all the fuss is about or wanting to understand more specifically. So I wanted to just shed a little light on that today. So, okay. Um, First off, just quickly, why muscle mass matters for women, especially as we get into that perimenopause and on. So, it's really important for metabolism and weight management. So, muscle it weighs more than fat, but it's more metabolically active than fat tissue, meaning that the more muscle mass somebody has, the higher their resting metabolic rate. Um, Also worth noting, age-related muscle loss, so sarcopenia, can play a role in body composition changes over time. So, it really kind of starts in our 30s, but women, we start to lose about 3 to 8% of muscle mass per decade if we're not doing anything to maintain that. So when someone is losing muscle, that can lead to slower metabolism, weight gain, and also reduced strength and mobility. That expression, you don't stop exercising because you get old because you start exercising, kind of what we're talking about here. So this is why, somebody may find that they may not have changed their diet or exercise habits, but that as they get older, they notice their body either looks different, even if their weight doesn't change, or they notice that it is easier to gain weight and harder to lose weight. A lot of that has to do with just age-related changes in muscle mass. And that said, there are things that we can do to offset those changes. So we'll talk about that in a few. Okay, why is this happening at a certain time with women? Like what's going on? So as our hormones start to shift, that can impact um, the way our body maintains muscle. So estrogen, for example, as estrogen levels decline, because estrogen plays a role in the maintenance of muscle mass, as estrogen levels go down, muscle breakdown can also accelerate. So, this is why strength training and protein intake are really helpful for focusing on as your estrogen levels start to go down. Whether you have the blood test to really show your estrogen levels, many women find that they can start to feel things are different. But just as you're kind of getting to that phase of life, there's so many different ways of describing it, but just making sure you are doing some kind of strength training or really looking at whether that strength training needs to be optimized and taking a look at your protein intake as well can be helpful. And then also, just something else to know is that bone health is a piece of the picture. So resistance training, so like strength training, whether that's like weight training, resistance bands, body weight exercises, etc. This actually can increase bone density, which is really important for reducing fracture risk. It's also just noteworthy that strong muscles support better balance and stability, which helps protect against falls. If you have the muscle strength to be able to like catch yourself if you fall, or have if you start to fall or lose your balance, that can be very protective. And just as we get older, bone mineral density does start to decrease, so we are naturally more at risk for fractures. And then if you're also at increased risk of falls because you lack mobility and the muscles to help you stay balanced, it's kind of two things that are not very helpful. So just that's another reason that this can be really important. And then also something I pay a lot of attention to in my practice is blood sugar and insulin sensitivity. So, when you have more muscle, that generally speaking can improve glucose uptake and insulin sensitivity, which reduces your risk of type 2 diabetes. So by what I mean in more like real people language is that, if you have more muscle mass, your body is more efficiently able to process the carbohydrates that you eat and turn them into energy and utilize them, get those carbs to, it's the glucose to the muscles that need it, rather than it starting to, build up in your bloodstream and increasing risk of type 2 diabetes, or leading to insulin resistance and related issues. So muscle is really helpful for that too. And then kind of related, there are some studies linking muscle strength to longer life expectancy. I can link to that in the show notes. Strength training has also been shown to reduce symptoms of depression and anxiety. So from a mental health perspective, there's some benefits to strength training. So it may not necessarily be like directly that having muscle makes you less depressed, but maybe there are studies that will show that at some point, but that the act of doing that strength training exercise has been associated with reduced symptoms of depression and anxiety. And also you get that nice endorphin boost, which can build your confidence and kind of help you be consistent with healthy habits and just feel good. So just to recap that, why muscle matters, for metabolism and weight management, it dealing with or coping with the age-related muscle loss and its impact, um, hormones and muscle retention, there's definitely a relationship there, for protecting bone health and protecting against osteoporosis and protecting against fractures and falls, blood sugar and insulin sensitivity, and then mental health and longevity. So those are some big reasons that muscle mass matters. This is why we talk about this stuff, right? Like when you hear me saying like eat adequate protein, strength train, like it's not just because it sounds pretty, it looks good on Instagram. Like this is really good stuff for our health. So if you're, already in that over 35 age group, and you're like, okay, what do I do? I've never really paid attention to this before. You're feeling overwhelmed. I'm going to share a few things with you that, any one of these would be a good place to start, but, just a few things that have been shown to be important. So, okay, strength training. Like this is huge. I've been a dietitian for over a decade. And I have been, yeah, like almost 15 years. Wow. I have been begging my clients and patients to strength train for years. And it's kind of cool to see that more women are getting on board with this instead of being afraid of being bulky. I started strength training, I mean, really technically in high school. I was an athlete, shockingly, because I'm so not like, I was an athlete when I was young, and I was introduced to strength training through that. But I didn't really, and then college, like I mostly did yoga and Pilates and cardio. Um, and then as I got to like early adulthood, I started thinking more about injury prevention, because I did deal with some nasty injuries because I didn't have really great strength. I started doing strength training like in the gym where I lived, and I loved it. I just was like, this feels really good. I'm a small person. If you've never met me in person, or I'm 4'11". I come from a long line of tiny Mediterranean ladies, so anything that makes me feel stronger is a plus in my book. So I really enjoyed that. But putting on my Pilates instructor hat for a sec, I'm sometimes asked, how much strength training, what kind of strength training, like what's the goal, right? And I typically will recommend 2 to 3 days per week of resistance training is a pretty good goal. Or another way to look at it is working each muscle group. So by that I mean like your upper body, your lower body. I would put core in there too, but your upper, your lower body, like work each muscle group ideally at least twice a week. And definitely make sure that there are rest days happening. Definitely don't want to overwork muscles, because that, when we get injured, that sets us back. It doesn't feel good. The goal is to feel well and have a long, enjoyable, healthy life. So 2 to 3 days a week, or looking at it as working each muscle group twice a week. And you can get more specialized. I'm not going to go too deep into things like specifically what types of exercises, kind of, because that we could be here all day. And I think that would be a conversation I'd love to have with a trainer who is doing more strength training with their clients, like is there all day, every day. But just making sure that you are working those muscle groups, whether it is through lifting weights, using resistance bands, Isometric exercises are really wonderful for working in there. Body weight exercises, that's like planks, push-ups, squats, lunges, that kind of stuff. And also gradually increasing weights or reps because, we do, as we build up strength, we do need to continue to challenge the body over time. So if you've been strength training for a long time, um, and you're starting to notice though you're not seeing the same results, that might be a time to look at, okay, is this a good time to maybe increase your weights? Or is it a good time to increase your reps? Um, because I think if you've been lifting the same 5 pound weights for the past 5 years, maybe time to see how the sevens feel and like take it from there. But form first, always be safe. If you find that you are lifting weights or do it using a different level of resistance band and it's your form is being compromised, that's a sign like back off. Like you want to maintain proper form because that's how you're going to avoid getting injured. So that's just my 2 cents about that one. Um, but then next up, okay, protein. So protein is really important. I know right now we're in a media cycle where we're seeing like high protein everything. And I think, it's funny, as a dietitian, I like there's a lot of stuff that I'm seeing in the media that's really consistent with things I've been telling people to do for years, except the language is different or like the packaging of the message is different. When I talk about adequate protein, it's not that far off really from that, like, 100 grams a day or 20 to 30 grams per meal. Like I find that for many women, that's a good ballpark. Some may need more, some may need a little bit less. But it's so funny because people sometimes come after the high protein stuff too, and they're like, you really don't need a ton of protein. And I'm like, I'm not talking about a ton of protein. I'm talking about adequate protein because that recommendation that many of us are used to hearing of the zero point 0.8 to 1 grams per kilogram in terms of protein needs, like that is bare minimum. That is like what is required to keep you alive. That is not necessarily an optimal level of protein for healthy metabolism, especially as we get older, because we do want to counteract those effects of that sarcopenia. So, there's a pretty big range, but generally speaking, anywhere from like 1.2 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day has been recommended for supporting muscle maintenance. For a lot of my clients, they prefer to just think of it as like a gram per pound of either their current weight if they're trying to maintain or their ideal body weight if they're on a weight loss journey. So just to keep that in mind, like uh, and protein sources, you can get it from animals, you can get it from plants, like protein supplements like powders have their place sometimes, but I think variety is really important. Like some of my personal favorites are like Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, lean proteins like poultry, like chicken, and we do a lot of ground turkey in my house. Fish, I love. I might have said that already. But then there are plant-based options like tofu, tempeh, and like beans, peas, lentils. They also offer a little bit of protein. Maybe not like you'd have to eat a much larger volume to get to that, 30 grams, say. But, I think combining a variety of foods is really good. And there's a whole wide range of different types of protein powders and such out there too. But big picture, like you want to spread it out pretty evenly across the day. So I was saying that 20 to 30 grams ish per meal rather than having minimal protein and then trying to get like 100 grams in one sitting because your body's not really going to be able to process all that protein. It's also going to feel kind of uncomfortable. So just to keep that in mind, like spread it out through the day. And our body loves consistency and routine in that respect. Like we need that consistent fuel through the day. I keep doing these like same hand motions. So if you're watching this on video, I know I've been called out for talking a lot with my hands. Like I'm Italian. I'm from New Jersey. Like, what do you want? Like, this is just what I do. So if you have a problem with it, turn the video off. All right. I also wanted to add, don't be afraid of carbs and fats. And I'm gonna be honest, this was something I had to learn for myself. I definitely went through some cycles of like, I don't know if it's like full on carb phobia, but sort of like a hesitancy with carbs that maybe, I think many years ago, like more than 25 years ago, when I was dealing with eating disorder recovery, I was like 11, 12 years old. Like carbs were not an issue then. Like it was like the late 90s. So like very different like media world. But I think I've had to be mindful that like my brain sometimes just my wiring, especially when you factor in like some of my neurodivergence, like I can get kind of like caught on something and like may find myself like not eating a particular type of food for a while. And, so if I got in a habit at one point of like limiting carbs for whatever reason, like, I had like because I did go through a phase where I think I just OD'd on oatmeal in my 20s. Then I just needed to like find my way back to healthy carbs, we'll say. Especially as I was going through a lot of hormonal changes, like in my mid and like late, especially my mid 30s. It was just a time of like exploring and figuring some things out. But I personally, and I can tell you this, you don't have to be afraid of carbs. We need carbohydrates to fuel our brain and our body. Really important, especially if you're active, because when we exercise, our body utilizes glycogen from our muscles to get us through that activity. So when those stores are depleted, we need to replenish them. So, definitely don't be afraid to eat healthy carbs. When I say healthy carbs, I mean like complex carbs, things that are a good source of fiber, a lot of vitamins and minerals happening, antioxidants, if we're talking about like fruits and starchy veggies. We need them for fueling our workouts and for recovering. The exact amount someone needs is going to vary from person to person, but it does matter. And then I would also say healthy fats. And this is, I have to beg people less to eat fat now than I used to. But, fat is really important for supporting hormone balance. Our body utilizes fat to make hormones. It also plays a really big role in um, nutrient absorption. And so things like avocado, nuts, seeds, olive oil, like don't be scared. Just include it, in small amounts through the day. It's not, it's your friend. And then some other stuff to keep in mind beyond nutrition and exercise. As a health coach, I talk a lot about because as an RD, I'm also a health coach, also Pilates instructor. I practice Reiki. I find that it's not just about the food and the exercise. We really need to look at recovery and sleep. So I have a lot of women I work with are scared to take days off of exercise, especially, if maybe in the past they've been an athlete and they're used to really intense training. Or I've definitely seen some people who have been on, like restrictive eating and intense exercise regimens, whether there are disordered eating or exercise patterns, whether there is a full-on eating disorder or history of. But that's something we have to watch out for because if we are working our muscles really hard every day, there's no chance for them to recover and really build. Um, I can't emphasize that enough. Like muscle growth actually happens during recovery, not just in the gym. So building in, a couple rest days into your regular routine is really important. It might feel weird at first. So if you're one of those people that like you don't feel like you have earned your food if you have not run or like done cardio or worked out intensely that day, um, maybe start with like, a gentle walk or something, or meditation or stretching, something that you feel, the blood's flowing, the oxygen's flowing, but is not going to be harming or, working against you. So don't be afraid to take rest time. It's really important. And while we're speaking of rest, sleep. So this is tricky, right? Because we know that adults need 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. And if you're listening to this and you're laughing, like I've been there, I get that. But okay, so hear me out. Sleep deprivation has been shown to increase muscle breakdown and decrease strength gain. So not helpful for building and retaining muscle. Inconveniently, as our hormones start to change, that can impact our sleep quality. So, for example, changes in progesterone levels that can impact sleep quality. Testosterone levels, like as I'm recording this, I'm actually personally on a little journey of addressing some low testosterone through like lifestyle and supplementation. And one of the things that I first noticed that got me that tipped me off it was time to get some labs done was like I noticed that my sleep quality felt different even though I was doing all of the same sleep hygiene practices. So and I know it's you're like, okay, I don't get it, like I didn't change anything. And so it's sometimes just knowing what's going on can be really helpful. So being intentional about our sleep hygiene. So you probably heard me say this before, but some of the basics like keeping the sleeping environment cool, dark, and quiet, having a relaxing wind down routine at night, um, limiting screen time and exposure to bright lights at night. I personally, I incorporate journaling at night, aromatherapy. If you ever wake up in the night, you're like desperate to fall back asleep. My favorite thing for this is taking a quick shower, just to because that exposure to the warm water, it helps reduce our core body temperature, which can help us fall back asleep and stay asleep. So that's my personal favorite. But there's so many ways to support more restful sleep. So I do encourage that if you are dealing with some sleep issues, to really explore what can help you feel better. So, other things that help, um, really looking at stress management, because, and this is something I feel was contributing a lot to my personal hormone related issues. But when you have a lot of stress in your life, that can um, cause an increase in cortisol levels, and that can really mess with your sleep. It can impact your hormones. It can also lead to muscle breakdown. So if you have a lot of stress in your life, it'd be silly for me to tell you like, well, just reduce your stress. Like, yeah, that sounds great, right? Like, sure. But what can you do to manage the stress? So, meditation, journaling, therapy, aromatherapy, time in nature, whatever works for you. Any hobbies that or practices that you can easily, sustainably incorporate into your day that help you manage stress can be very effective. Um, so that's like kind of offsetting some of the effects of the stress, but then also looking more deeply at where is that stress coming from? And are there shifts that you can make in your life to help reduce it a little bit or make it feel more manageable? Where can you get support? So definitely, and sometimes that'll be something very small and minor. Sometimes that might require a bigger shift, but if you are looking at something bigger, I would definitely, weigh the pros and cons, right? And consider the cost of not managing your stress. Like, how's that going to affect your long-term health? And then I always say consult with a professional, right? Like maybe supplementation is something to look at. I know we're hearing a lot about creatine, monohydrate. We're hearing about collagen and vitamin C. Creatine is very commonly recommended for supporting muscle strength and recovery. I personally love it. It depends, I think every person is different, but it is something that I use and frequently recommend. Um, so you will also see things about vitamin C and collagen to support connective tissues and joint health. We're still learning more about this. I don't think that either one of these things can hurt. But again, you want to consult with a medical provider. And then I personally love magnesium for for promoting restful sleep. Like you guys have probably heard me nerd out about magnesium glycinate and magnesium L-threonate and such for promoting restful sleep. But that is one of my favorites. Again, always touch base with your provider. Uh, and look for products from reputable brands. If you need recommendations, you can reach out to me on my website, jessicacordingnutrition.com, or DM me on Instagram at jesscording. I'm always happy to share some of my favorites with you. But with in terms of just supplementation, it's very individual, and I tend to recommend starting with just one or two things at a time, so if it's having an impact or not. Sometimes I see people try to take a million different supplements all at once, and they spend hundreds of dollars, and they have no idea if it's working or what is working. So a little bit at a time, I think, is a good starting place. So just to, main takeaway, I would just say like muscle, it's not just about aesthetics, right? It's about our long-term health, our strength, mobility, independence, if you want to take it that far. And it's never too late to start focusing on this. Small, consistent changes in your habits can have a major impact. So I know I shared a lot of different tips with you. I would say maybe pick one to start with today, right? Whether that's adding a strength training session to your week or getting more protein at breakfast. Find a lot of people struggle with that. Or maybe it's prioritizing your sleep a little bit more. Um, just as a disclaimer, yes, I am a registered dietitian. I am not your registered dietitian. So it's this is not a replacement for medical advice or advice from like a counseling, an official counseling session with a provider. This is for education purposes only. But if you are struggling, reach out to me, reach out to your healthcare provider for referrals. There are so many of us out there who are here to support you. You don't have to do this stuff alone. And I hope that you found this helpful. If you want more tips on what to eat, how to move your body to feel your best, I would invite you to join my Substack. I am jessicacording.substack.com. Every week I share new content with you guys. I'd love to see you there. And feel free to connect with me on social media. As always, you guys, it has been a joy being with you here. I can talk. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll talk soon.